Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap, as always. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our panelists, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can during today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Value Stream Management, the future or distraction. We have a bunch of happy people, as you can see on the camera, on your screen today, and are going to have a really, hopefully spirited conversation about this. And Helen Beal, who is a strategic advisor at DevOps Institute, is going to actually be moderating today's discussion. So with that, Helen, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can make the introductions and kick off your discussions. I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks so much, Charlene. And yeah, hello to everybody. Welcome to today's webinar from Value Stream Management Experts Plutora. As Charlene said, I'm Helen Beal and I'll be hosting the panel discussion today. And as Charlene said, we'll be talking about value stream management, whether it's the future or just a distraction. Today I'm joined by Bob Davis, the CMO at Plutora, if he'd like to wave. Heath Dawn, a digital transformation consultant here at Spaceforce. Thank you, Heath. And Mark Cluett, founder at Yukon Cherry. So let's get started. I think we'll send the first question over to Mark, since he was the last one to wave. Mark, what is value stream management and where does it come from?
So value stream management comes from the same place as Kanban. It comes from Toyota. And it's all about realizing all these different streams inside your product line and mapping all of those with the customer outcome and the customer value that you provide into them. So that would be my quickest definition of value stream management.
Nice and succinct. Bob, would you like to add or expand on Mark's words?
Certainly think all that's true. I kind of view it as almost a management layer on top of a heterogeneous set of development tools, testing tools, monitoring tools, verification tools, environment tools, planning tools, all these things that go into building software. In order to do that well and have the opportunity to ensure you can deliver value to the users, value stream management sits on top, correlates that information, and provides you that visibility, which allows you to deliver software faster, better, on time, and higher quality.
So like an umbrella over the DevOps toolchain.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Heath, do you share that view or do you have a slightly different idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Mark and Bob. I mean, we're going through this digital revolution today, and there's no need for this command and control management that we've had for the last 100 years as we used our physical hands, and now that we use our minds, we're flattening out these organizations into these cross-cutting value streams that go from the business into the IT organization, and IT has to deliver business value. So how do you measure business value? How can you improve so that you can deliver value quicker and higher quality? And value stream management is this fundamental shift of flattening out organizations and having that layer that Bob said sitting on top of your DevOps tool chain and leveraging into the business as well to have one piece flowing through your organization.
Where does it come from, Heath? What's its background?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So if you look back, you have the Agile came out 2001, DevOps 2009 by Andrew Clay Schaefer, really focusing on building and testing our code, really that CI/CD process. And now what we're seeing is that's expanding, right? In the last 3 years, this value stream management, value stream mapping has really blown up, this new buzzword that I think is going to stick around for a while. I think it's this revolution, and It comes from value stream mapping, so mapping out processes, looking at waste, and now we're seeing companies like Platero and others that are coming on the scene to build these solutions that we can help us identify that waste and improve.
So what's the relationship then, Bob, between value stream mapping and value stream management?
Well, value stream management is an ongoing process that is always alive, always active, helping to orchestrate a workflow, helping to provide feedback to both practitioners and execs alike in the manner that we've been describing. Value stream mapping is more of an event where I take a look at my pipelines, my value stream pipelines. Maybe it's one pipeline, maybe it's multiple pipelines, but I take a look at it and I map all the actual processes of what's going on at every step of the way. And I get a steady state. This is a beginning point of view. So here's where I sit today. This is my efficiency. This is where my waste is. This is where I'm doing well. So I get a bird's eye view what the founders of value stream management way back in the 60s in manufacturing would call a catwalk over the development process, to be able to see where I'm doing well and where I need improvement. Once I have that view, that map, now I work to improve it. I put energy into automating a task that might be in need of such a thing so that it moves more efficiently. I might need to incorporate security earlier in the process so as not to have to wait for security. And I would have seen the wait state, in my value stream map, giving me action items that I can do and then manage in my value stream management processes. And then at a future point in time, take another snapshot and say, okay, where am I now? How have I improved? So value stream mapping gives you a very clear view of where you're improving and where you need to improve. And value stream management is the process that actually helps orchestrate and manage the delivery of software across the tools.
So I think what we've learned from that is that value stream mapping is a lean tool that has its origins back in lean manufacturing movement, so Japan in the 1950s and Toyota. So Mark, is value stream mapping, or no, let's not do a yes or no. How would you describe the adoption of value stream mapping in the marketplace today?
So if you look at Agile methodologies and you look at DevOps, you can see that people have been adopting these in different waves according to the pains and the things they needed to solve, right? So they started with, I said, Agile software and DevOps, and from there they started moving to the cloud because it was more efficient, more effective. But then they realized that all of these needed to somehow tie together, right, and bring that value back to the customer and be able to track where changes are. And that's where value stream management is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in companies that started doing all this cultural and digital transformation. And then they realized that these, without any kind of control or any kind of mapping, it became something that would either consume a lot of money or wouldn't give enough value back to the business.
So is value stream mapping, rather than management, something that you generally practice when you're working on a day-to-day project or transformation in a business?
I do use it quite a lot, and it's important for two different things. One of them is to understand if the direction that you're going is the right one, and if you're providing that value that you need to do, is following, as Jonathan Smart says, bringing better value sooner, safer, happier, right? So it's very important to understand where the value inherently lies. And I do use mapping quite effectively to show that, and to also show to the business the progress, right? Because one of the things that happen with any transformation is that you want to make sure that the business is always aware in which phase they are, because otherwise they either get too excited or get too scared, right? So it's important to handhold them with the right metrics to be able to demonstrate the value.
And your experience then, Heath, how does that reflect on Mark's experience, and how do you see the adoption of value stream mapping specifically in the market today? Is it emergent, or is it like a standard DevOps transformation practice? Where do you think mapping's at?
I definitely think it's in its infinite stage. I don't see too many organizations very mature in this process. So as we come into organizations, we look at the cycle time from when we have the first idea of this new feature, the ideation to delivery, and most of the time the business doesn't understand that, doesn't even know the cycle time. And especially within the U.S. military, I mean, the cycle time is very long, you know, several quarters to write requirements, do complex design for satellite systems. Might be shorter for maybe a tech company or banking or telco. But value stream mapping visualizes that. And to Bob's point, he was talking about production, the Toyota production system. You know, we think about waste. We think about waste in manufacturing, waste that could be like extra inventory that we purchase that sits in a warehouse for a year that we're not using, or motion or task switching. So we can apply those same principles to software development as well with extra features. Most users only care about 20% of the features that are available. You think about the apps that you use on your phone, you use those same features. So you know, building extra features is not providing value to the business if the users aren't using those. Or task switching, right? We see about a 20% increase in waste just by task switching, or delays or handoffs. And so value stream mapping helps us visualize that, visualize those handoffs, the wait times, and then we can go in and focus in on improving those wait times by creating a new value stream or a future model to do that. And value stream management is an automated process to do that once you've gotten past the value stream mapping perspective.
I'm going to come back to waste in a little while and pick up on something you just said about where value stream mapping is in terms of being adopted as a tool in the market. And I think the point you were making is that in the market, or the horizontal industry that you're working in at the moment, the adoption of it as a kind of standard tool during a transformation, a DevOps transformation in particular, is quite low. You made the point it might vary across industry. So Bob, you're somebody that sees a lot of customers in a lot of different industries. Do you think there's a different pattern of adoption across different industries in terms of the way people are using value stream mapping specifically?
I think there's no question that there's differences across industries. You know, I think let's keep in mind the context. Value stream management and mapping, for that matter, in the context of software development, in the way we're talking about it now, really just came onto the scene about 2 years ago, when Forrester started talking about value stream management as a market category in the world of DevOps. Prior to that, there had been a lot of names for the kinds of things that are going on, and it all kind of came together. So everybody's been, you know, witnessing the birth of this category. And in the meantime, the amount of change that's going on in the world is incredible from the standpoint of digital transformation. 6 months ago, we were talking about how quickly the world was evolving from a digital transformation point of view, how autonomous teams were starting to take up, how containers and cloud were taking over in the world of development, and the cloud management and cloud performance and all this were everything that's going on. And everybody wants to talk about and use those new technologies. When we sell and talk to prospects and customers, we're talking to much more traditional businesses like banking, financial services, insurance companies, telcos, pharmaceutical and healthcare businesses. These are businesses that have been around for a good long while and have a tremendous amount of legacy systems, both in terms of hardware and software, but also in terms of process and people that have been in those process roles for years and years and years and years. And everybody is now getting tremendous amount of pressure. A common question we get is, I used to do my software development and it was fairly straightforward. I could keep track of it in spreadsheets, I could share files, we could do meetings, and that was great when I was releasing software every 6 months. But now I'm being asked to release software much more quickly than that, maybe every month. And my systems are no longer able to keep up with that level of activity and that short time span. In the meantime, the technologies themselves are changing. So I've got waterfall, backend, mainframe technologies that are legacy, and now I've got more modern mobile and web apps that need to connect to those things. And the development, the cycle times that Heath was talking about, they vary depending on those technologies. And when I start to integrate them to where a mobile app that requires security on a mainframe that gets upgraded every 6 months instead of every week, how do I integrate those things? How do I manage that? And so the degree to which people recognize those problems and are starting to get their head wrapped around it defines that maturity. I agree with Heath completely in the sense that the level of maturity is very low in those organizations relative to mapping, because they really don't even have a solid idea of all the dependencies and intricacies between the processes. So there's a whole lot of discovery that has to happen, and in the industries where we're talking about, that's really classic. And I've had people, when we were doing a survey, I had one gentleman, suggest, I don't even know why you guys even exist, Plutora, because we've been releasing software remotely and doing open source software development for years and years and years and never had any trouble. I don't understand why this is even an issue. And the problem that shows is the perspective. Somebody that's grown up in that development world, that's lived in open source, that maybe worked at Google or Facebook or one of these more advanced, it's second nature to them. But you start to bring in these legacy systems and tools, and it's a heavy lift to get people across the line and understand what it takes to make those changes. And that's what this world is. That's what value stream mapping starts to do. It says, okay, let's get our arms around the process and just understand what's going on. People don't know what's going on. Let's just get everybody in a room. Let's get some sticky notes and let's start to figure out what's going on. And the technical barrier to do that is low. But the process and human part of that is challenging. And I think, I would look to the coaches, both Heath and Mark provide digital transformation coaching, and I imagine you would see that level of struggle with people that are steeped in that past, trying to move quickly to be able to compete with software, but aren't quite sure how to do it. And even when they start to figure it out, they don't know where all the pieces lead. So it's a challenge. It's a very big challenge, and it's new relative to software development, just a couple of years.
We're getting some questions from the audience now, actually, and you're kind of starting to answer one of them, but I'm going to put it out to Mark as well. How does one bring the topic of value stream mapping and management into an environment that doesn't see the issue? So how do we sell the concept of thinking like value streams and mapping our value streams to leadership if they don't know about it?
So there's two different ways that I normally approach that. I would say the most common way, unfortunately, is that due to that lack of awareness of where value resides and how to map that back to the process, all these organizations, they jump into the bandwagon of digital transformation and they say, we want one of everything, right? We want one of these, one of that, one of these, because that will be awesome. And all of these together will generate something amazing, but they don't have in mind how does that map back into the value that they provide as a business. So they end up normally with a huge bill from AWS or from Azure or someone similar. And then they start to panic and say what we've done wrong, right? Because we wanted to move away from a data center, we wanted to get a faster life cycle in software delivery, and we ended up paying 3 times what we were paying, and we are as slow as we were. So then they think that this digital transformation is failing to them, right? And that's when most of them embrace these methods of value mapping and understand exactly what they need to do and how much they need to do to bring that value sooner to the market, and see the processes that they have. They are superfluous to the business, right? In the sense that those processes, a lot of the times it happens that they are there just because they have been there all the time, right? So, for example, at a bank or at or any regulated industry, they go, oh yeah, we have this process. What does it do? Oh well, it's been here forever, right? So it's a question of challenging all of these, understanding how to get the processes leaner. How does that map back to the value, and then be able to show to the customer the progress on that?
So we have to challenge the status quo and show them that they're going to be able to make things faster. Heath, any tips on how to show people this is going to make their lives so much better and they should commit to getting in a room and doing this?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the money that we're spending on transformation around the world, it's in excess of trillions with a T. And a lot of transformations are failing. It's due to many reasons: communication, leadership buy-in, but you can't just force transformation. It has to happen down in the trenches where the hands are on the keyboard. And so how do you do that? Well, you bring those people in that know the work, that know what needs to get done, and you map that process out. Once you get buy-in, and it helps get buy-in too, because in order to transform an organization, you have to have it from the top and the bottom come together. And so value stream mapping is just a very powerful tool. It gives everybody a voice. You know, you get them in a room and you look at thinking about the entire system that you're building, and focusing on that customer, that end user, and visualizing that in a very powerful way. And then you start making improvements. But I love it because it really helps get the buy-in from the folks on the keyboards.
It is such a powerful tool, and it does get buy-in from the doers. I think, you know, one of the big challenges is getting people to the leadership to commit to doing it in the first place. And we've got another question, which is, what are some of the challenges faced in doing value stream mapping? I'd say that's the number one problem, is getting the leadership to allow people to spend the time doing it and learning from each other and learning about the cycle time. I think there's some other challenges though. I'd say one of them is that people do it as a one-off exercise, and it really should be a continuous process where they keep on coming back and reviewing what their progress is. And I understand why that is, because it is a really expensive exercise, because you have to get a bunch of people in a space, whether it's a physical or virtual space, together for a considerable amount of time, whilst they're not doing their jobs, so they're not doing their kind of daily work. Anybody else got any other challenges faced when we're trying to do value stream mapping?
Yeah, I would say also, you know, try not to, you know, just kind of carve off a little piece of the elephant. You know, don't try to do everything. I think a lot of times we, you know, leadership says, yes, let's do it. I saw a video on YouTube about it. Let's do it. Let's allocate 3 hours, and we do it. And like you said, Helen, we have to revisit it every time, but maybe start with, you know, a small part of the SDLC, you know, the CI/CD pipeline, or how Jira and Bitbucket and the tools start to come together, or start doing customer mapping, working backwards, but just iteratively do that to build out that VSM. They typically, I think if you read Karen Martin's book, Value Stream Mapping, it's like 3 days, 3 full days of value stream mapping, the process, and then 1 full day of the future process. So a 4-day total workshop, which is an insane amount of time that leaders would have a hard time.
With leadership in it as well. Yeah. I mean, the amount of salary you can get in a room when you've got 12 senior leaders for 4 days.
Right.
Quite a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry. I think this also goes to a very interesting topic in general in a lot of organizations that are trying to transform, which is the rapid prototyping, right? So there's, especially when you're going from a very waterfall-y experience, and that's where you feel comfortable, telling them that it's okay just to do this small piece and release this small piece, even if it's not 100% baked. So that way you can try it back, understand if that's the right thing or not, and then be able to progress on that. As you were saying, Heath, I think it's very important to get that concept across, that it's fine to chisel away the problem slowly rather than getting everyone a week away from the desks and trying to solve it in one go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that we can break it down into smaller pieces, and that helps to make it more incremental. Bob, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think those. I mean, the notion of starting small is really powerful, and that's super important to do. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think, you know, once, you know, we were talking about getting people bought in and getting the process started. One of the things to keep in mind, perhaps, and one of the things we try to do as a vendor is once that initial map is done, and I can start to see the value of the exercise, and I can start to get visibility into where problems are, and I can say, you know, I'd like to do this more often. So now you have a product like what we provide, like a value stream management product. There are a number. They're integrating into the capabilities and tools that are sitting in the tool chain. They're also integrating into manual processes, perhaps governance processes, compliance processes, and so forth that might not be embedded in one of the tools. That data is now available to the system. And so the value stream map is now something that I can get an ongoing view. It can become like a dashboard, so that I can get ultimately real-time indications of where I might be getting better and where I might be starting to go off the rails. So the process of value stream management could easily become much more straightforward and much more a part of the overall process of building software rather than a 3-day, retreat, once I start moving through the process. Because the unknowns and the discovery moments and the aha moments of, gee, I didn't realize that we were waiting for this. Those shouldn't happen every time you sit down and do a value stream map. I mean, you should be, learning and getting better. And as the systems start to take a stronger role, particularly when we start to talk about governance and compliance, industries, remember that we're talking to, have a high degree of requirement in those areas. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about is this notion of compliance needs to go from a process and become a technology. So governance needs to actually start to become a technology rather than managed by people. And if I start to get very broad remote teams across multiple technologies, maybe multiple time zones, working out of their offices at home, the issue of bringing that all together in a meaningful dashboard that gives me real-time information I can act on quickly, that's hard to do. And a mapping process, getting everybody in a room, well, right there, that's harder to do now. And we can still do Zoom and stuff and that sort of thing, but the bottom line is that, that the world we're living in is going to require that technology to take a bigger role. And in the context of value stream mapping and the ongoing view of how I'm getting better, it could become much more like a dashboard. And that's certainly the goal of the kind of product that we're providing, just to simplify that process. And I think, that's where it might be heading.
Yeah, and
so
also
just to summarize what you just said, Bob, what we're seeing with value stream management is it allows us to automate the value stream map. So
Right.
Whereas in the past we've required a bunch of humans in a space, whether it's physical or virtual, and there are benefits in terms of learning from each other to be in that space together, it's a really expensive and time-consuming hobby, if you like, to do a value stream map. And what we really want is the teams to be able to inspect the data themselves on a very regular basis, perhaps even a sprint basis, and adapt accordingly. So using value stream management to automate that generation of the same measurements that we're getting from our heads is a really, really powerful message, I think. And then what you just said about effectively creating the foundation for continuous compliance as well, and understanding that we have continuous compliance is very vital to the whole scenario also. Does anyone want to add anything else to that, or can we talk about what is value?
I would just quickly add something. I would say with value stream mapping, and especially the faster, it's one of the tools that enables you to go faster, right? And the faster you go, some of these processes start to become a lot more heavier embedded into the code and ways of doing. So, for example, you were talking about continuous compliance. So there's a new emerging set of software, the policy as code software, that is helping a lot into that. And we started to use that with some customers in financial institutions, where all these processes that you have to do to approve a new piece of software, a new feature, would have to go through 5-6 different boards: risk, governance, IT, architecture, etc., etc. Where now most of these is already slipstream into the process itself. So rather than going to the boards for every single thing, you do, I would say, you go to the boards by exception. So you have a series of sets mapped inside the code itself, and then if you're going inside those lines, then you're more than happy to keep going, and you don't need that permission until the end. Where before it was for every single piece and every single thing that you have to do. So this is one of the ways I would say value stream mapping especially is really helping out, because that helps design and agree all these mapping and all these processes and all this governance that then goes into the code.
Rather than ask about what is value then, Mark, I'm going to go to one of the audience questions, which is, what are the criteria that decide whether an activity is value added or whether it is a waste? Mark, do you have an answer?
I would say Heath will be able to answer this better than me. Normally, what I would say is that for me, waste is any activity that won't provide any direct benefit to the business and will actually slow down the process, right? So we need to challenge any single activity that does that. and understand the reasoning behind it, if it actually is something valuable, right? So, and said, especially for old institutions where you have all these processes that have been there for more than 30 years, up to the point that nobody understands why they are there anymore. Or maybe the financial auditor changed and they didn't realize, but they kept doing things that were there 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, so as a value stream mapping practitioner myself, an example of a non-value adding activity that occurs in those sort of organisations would be the CAB or the change approval board. You see it everywhere. It doesn't create anything for the customer really or the business. It's important from a governance perspective, but we need to consider that in a different way. Another couple of interesting ones, development, quite clearly adding value is where we're creating the actual product that the customer's going to use. But testing, not really creating any value, but we all know that we have to do testing, right? So it's a really good question from the audience, and one that I spend a lot of time chatting with customers about. But let's pass it over to Heath, as he suggested, and get his view on it.
Sure.
Well, what's the criteria for a value-adding activity?
I mean, this is a big one for me, just because, you know, currently supporting the military, and so we have, you know, 200 years of military tradition, and so we want to keep that. We want to keep a lot of those great traditions, but maybe not a lot of those processes that are in place. And so we see a lot of those, like engineering review boards, decision review boards, change review boards, lots of you know, build design review, which is a 3-day event of PowerPoints and lots of documentation. So we can start to move past that and automate and make things more efficient. And so you're definitely going to always see some of those legacy processes, and value stream mapping will help you identify that in a more visual way to improve and move away from some of those legacy processes.
I think it's worth, sorry.
Carry on, Bob.
I was just going to say, we start to talk about waste in the context of things that add value. You know, if I'm waiting 30 days to get a test environment provisioned, and my code's ready, but I've got to wait 30 days because that's how long it takes me to do that in my organization, which is a real story of a real customer of ours. That's clearly waste. That is absolute unadulterated waste. And there's a huge amount of time in the process that's simply wasted effort because nothing is happening. And I'm waiting for the next step. I'm waiting for the security guy to come in. Is a security review a bad thing because I'm waiting for them to do it? I would argue a security review is not a bad thing, but not having it integrated into the process so that I then have to wait maybe a week for that person to surface and provide that review, that's waste. So there's a whole discussion about where the process is breaking down in terms of handoffs and dependencies that creates a huge amount of time. And if I can take that environment provisioning from 30 days to a couple hours, think of how much more efficient my pipeline is just by doing that. The second conversation is about value in the sense of, am I building something, or is a feature or a component of the application valuable, or is it a waste of time? And that starts to get into the notion of saying, okay, are people using the feature? And if they are, is it solid? Is it positive? Is it adding value to my customers? If the answer to that is, I don't know, then I can't really tell if a development function or a test function is adding value or not, because I don't know if anybody's using it. I could test something to where I have 0 bugs, but if nobody's using it, who cares? So there's this notion of connecting, am I actually delivering value to the customers, whether it's decrease in costs, whether it's a decrease in revenue, whether it's simplifying a process that's used in that business, and whatever it is, that's the value. So I want to map that value to the capabilities and functionality that I'm building into the system and say, where am I spending time building things that nobody cares about? That's a different kind of waste. And that's a lot harder to figure out, because I can't tell you how many people have no idea whether anybody's even using the features that are released. So if I don't know if they're being used, how can I determine whether that's value? So I just think it's important to note the notion of value and waste is applied differently when you're talking about the process issue versus the actual development content and whether or not it's adding value. So those are two completely different things.
I think there's actually three things here. There is what is value, so how do we define value? And that kind of links to how do we decide what a value adding activity in our value stream is. And then there's the third one, which is where are we wasting stuff in our value stream? Like you said, where are the handoffs? Where are we waiting for something? If we're waiting 2 months for a test environment to be created, and a test environment being created, by the way, is not a value adding activity, that's a huge amount of waste on so many different levels.
Well, I'd be careful about calling testing and test environments not value added.
The creation of a test environment is not value adding activity. It's not, the customer's not receiving any value, right?
If the creation of that test environment and the appropriate tests that are happening in that environment result in capabilities that function the way they're supposed to function without crashing the system, then I would argue that I'm adding value. And by not doing that, I create those problems. The amount of value that I'm taking away from the business, the amount of expense I'm going to have overcoming that business. Just talk to the Boeing CEO about what's it take to overcome from a catastrophic failure. And so creating a test environment isn't necessarily adding value per se, but testing the software is adding value. And if I need an environment to do that, then that's what it's doing. It's adding value. So I'd be careful about that.
Yeah, but I would say that there's one small difference there, right? And there's two different things. And it's one of them where we'll always see platforms and support as negative value activities, right? In the sense that they don't provide any real direct value to the customers. But at the same time, if you don't have them, you have nothing to deliver because you don't have a platform to run. You cannot support that platform, or you cannot support the developers that are building that platform, right? But I would say there's the big difference here between creating that testing environment, which is a negative value activity, and then doing the testing itself, which I think is a positive value activity in the sense, but it's a bit less tangible than the direct value that you create by the features. And it's a bit less tangible because it's tangible on quality and customer retention. And those are things that are fairly subjective unless you have a very clearly defined product. And that's where I would say one of the grayish areas of what value really means in this sense.
From a value adding perspective, testing is definitely the greyest area in my experience. And I think one of the steps we do in value stream mapping is identify the value adding activities in order to try and remove the ones that are not value adding or make them as small as possible. So if it is taking us days or weeks to make a test environment, we need to find a way to make that minutes or hours.
Great.
Or make it available. Let's move on to what is value though. So how do we define value? Is it, let me give you some examples. Is it net promoter score? Is it customer journey time? Is it basket size? How, Heath, we haven't heard from you in a little while. How do you measure value? How do you estimate what the return is from a piece of activity you're going to undertake?
So we use we'll use feature flags. That's a new technology to kind of help us understand value. It gives us feedback on what the users like and how many clicks and what they're using, that experience. A/B testing as well. Also, you know, in Agile, we like to have users come in and see the work that we're doing, right? So we'll do creative reviews, we'll do demonstrations, we'll give them gift cards and let them see the value. But throughout the journey and the life cycle of delivering that product to our users, we engage with them. So we might, at a bank, we might bring in our bank employees and get their feedback because they're talking to the users, the customers in the retail store and the customer call centers, so they can really represent that user, getting that feedback so that we understand, you know, what to build and what they truly care about. Remember, users really only use about 20% of the features that we use. If you think of Excel, There's thousands of features in Excel, but we probably only use about 5% of those features, right? So we want to really focus on building what the users care about and understanding the value that it needs. With us in the military, I like to introduce warfighter journey instead of customer journey. It's the warfighter journey, or the warfighter net promoter score, right? So how would they use that application out in the field as an operator? What are their pain points? What are they struggling to do? And how much value does that provide? It might not be a monetary value, but it could save lives. And so there's a value around that as well. Yes,
any other ways of, yeah, I mean, I think user feedback is key, isn't it? And the usage of a feature. I mean, I think Bob said this earlier, or one of you said it, if you spend a load of time creating something wonderful and beautiful and you put it out there and no one uses it, therefore they didn't want it, therefore it's not valuable, and you did just waste a load of time. So that's why it's so important to do small things and get quick feedback. Mark, any other metrics that you use to measure actual value of what you're delivering?
Yeah, I would say that I always try to make a distinction between direct value and indirect value, in the sense that there's activities that you do that generate very clear, tangible, direct value to the customer. Like, said, in a bank, I offer a new mortgages platform. Using new mortgages platform gives me 20% more market, right? So that would be a very clear, tangible value associated with that creation. Where one of the businesses that I used to work in and I helped transform, they worked a lot about intangible value, which was more around customer retention and eyeball retention, right? That's something that it's not directly a value-driven thing, because the value is when the customer actually executes on that retention and renews the contract, or buys something that they were tempted to, but finally they decided because you got in a place where you got their attention, right? But those generate value equally. So for me, it's very important to measure both, measure what gives us the business, right? What makes the money directly, but at the same time, all those quality factor values that can get back and generate more value. It's not something that generates value directly.
Yeah, maybe I have a point here to follow. So, I think it was 3 years ago, I went to IBM's annual conference in Vegas, and first Value Streams was really on the main stage then. I went back, met with the COO of the telecommunications company that I was supporting, and we were talking about penalties and around value, but really understanding kind of what Mark is alluding to on what's the cost associated with not delivering value, right? So at that time, we averaged about $4 per call to the call center, and we had about 250 million calls per year. So that's about $1 billion just in making phone call, to these 47 call centers around the world. And the number one reason why the customer made the call was because they did not understand their bill. The bill was 12 pages long. It had all these extra charges. We all remember those days. So what we did is we stood up our first value stream, and it was called the Understand My Bill value stream. And the goal was simply to take that 12-page bill and put it to 1 page, or even just remove the bill in general and it be automated on our phone. That was 3 years ago. So sometimes value is quantified by the penalty of not providing the value, or in Mark's example, the retention, keeping those customers. Or if you go into a mobile store and you get a new phone and it gets activated, and then you go to grandma's house and you have no cell phone reception at her house, and that's where you spend most of your time, now you're gonna be very upset and not have a good customer experience. And so creating a value stream around activations, being able to activate that phone and have that customer understand where they live and this reception at their grandma's house, all that data, you're going to need marketing and sales and a lot more people in your value stream to understand that customer experience and deliver value.
It's a great story. I kind of feel like we should have scheduled 3 hours for this. We're getting so many great questions through, and there's so much to talk about. But we're moving towards 15 minutes left, so I'm going to move us towards a few questions, because there's so many strong ones that I want to cover off at least a few of them. So here's one. Going faster is a big benefit. Can you leverage VSM practice as a tool to highlight investment or lack thereof in different types of work? So technical debt, bugs, security, next new cool things are the examples. So Bob, how can we use value stream management to let us know what sort of different types of work are happening in a value stream?
Well, that's one of the real strengths of value stream management, in fact, is to be able to, harvest all of the information and data of what's being built, where it's being built, who's doing what across the entire value stream. And now I can, I can look at that and understand exactly where, the value is. And could you ask that one more time, Helen, just real quick?
Sure. The person
Second
is asking how we use value stream management to analyze the different types of work that are happening. So it could be technical debt, it could be managing defects or security or doing the next new cool thing. So features, new development.
So all that information that's being, put into that common data model, that information layer that's inside the value stream management is all being correlated so that I can see where the data is coming from, what team is being built, how much of that is technical debt. It's all instrumented in those tools, and that provides dashboards that I can now look at and on a regular basis see exactly who's doing what, where the value is being created, where waste is, where wait times are, etc. I think that's a big part of what value stream management does, is it brings in all the information that's being addressed across all the different tools, normalizes it, puts it all on an even playing field, so now I can do the analytics necessary to understand what's going on. So it's the integrations into the tool chain that are the cornerstone of being able to provide that information, the data model, to be able to give you the information you're describing. And that's the key, that deep level of integration into the tool chain.
I think too, the person that's asking the question, value stream management helps us visualize, but I think what you're getting at really, this question is prioritization. So you're leveraging this in a very visual way to look at waste, but you ask the question of the new shiny feature, the bugs, the defects, the technical debt. As leaders, as value stream owners, right, prioritizing our work and helping guide those value streams, we have to prioritize and listen to our users, to the salespeople, marketing people want the new shiny button because the customers want that, but also our technical folks as well that say, hey, if we don't reduce this technical debt, if we don't start moving to the cloud, if we don't address this container issue or this, what Bob was saying earlier about spinning up a new test environment. So we have to equally always invest in our infrastructure and our internal processes and delivering value. And so value stream management helps visualize that, and then it can help us make a decision from a prioritization perspective. Build up that debt.
I want to pick up on something really important you said then. You mentioned sales and marketing, and of course, all of us are coming from this from an SDLC perspective. We work in technology, but we also live in a world that's digitally disrupted, and for organizations to survive, they have to become software companies, or at least software-driven organizations. We've had a couple of questions on the chat pointing out that we do seem to be talking about value streams being quite SDLC oriented. So let's have a quick chat about where a value stream starts, where it finishes, and how the rest of the business, the sales, marketing, HR, legal, procurement, finance, what their roles are in a value stream as well. So anyone want to kick us off there?
I think, one of the things that became really clear from a vendor point of view, as I was starting to talk to, the various analysts and customers about value stream management, it became pretty clear that value was in the eye of the beholder. And it's related to the question you're asking, Helen, because if you go and look at some of the vendors that are on the planning side, whether it's Agile Craft, which is now Jira Align within Atlassian, Target Process, you have version 1, which is a part of Digital AI, and these are all enterprise Agile planning tools. And the value and you go look on their materials, you go look on the websites, you go look at that information, and you'll hear them talk about value and making sure that the value streams are delivering the value to the business that the business is interested in delivering. So they talk about all that, and it sounds an awful lot like what we're talking about. But the value they're talking about is on the starting of the workload, the beginning of the value stream, the prioritizing of the initial projects, and the allocation of the budget from the IT workflows to the strategic goals of the company. So have I deployed my development staff, my value streams, if you will, have I deployed them, resourced them in a way that reflects the priority of the business? And there are a number of platforms on that enterprise Agile planning side. There are a number of frameworks like SAFe that live in that part of the world that set up my initial requirements that are driven from those strategic objectives of the organization. And to them, that's value. The question then is, now that I've got it all set up, it just gets released. And the view from that planning side of the back end of the process was relatively rudimentary. It was like, well, then release happens. On the release side, we didn't really worry so much about all the initial setup. It was really more check into production. And a lot of the value stream management companies are check into production as opposed to idea to cash. When value stream management came out and said, now it's idea to cash, all those enterprise planning vendors now are part of the mix. And if you look at the wave that Forrester published, at least half of those vendors are pure play planning vendors that don't really do anything on SDLC, but are still considered value stream management vendors. So value stream management absolutely starts on when the original idea or customer request comes in and goes all the way to where I'm resolved, generating revenue, saving costs, dealing with customer retention, whatever the point of the value stream was. And that awareness, that bringing in is one of the big things, because that's a whole other cultural issue. That's a whole other thing. You know, do the safe guys meet the DevOps guys, and what do they think? And now they're all part of a common management platform. It becomes, you know, the human aspect, that, you know, people, process, technology, that people aspect. Now I'm bridging not just multiple development teams and operations and test and dev, but now planning, the PMO office, the financial corp dev people potentially, the sales and marketing folks that he was talking about, they're all now all in on the value stream. So the more I get involved, the broader that scope becomes, which brings you back to start small. You don't have to boil the ocean, because you can get really, you know, that entire idea to cash involves a tremendous amount of process. And start small, look at it quickly, but it absolutely spans out all the way.
Anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, I would say that when we're talking about the value stream and the value stream management, I think it's very important as well to understand the different lenses that we can apply to it and the different personas inside the business, right? Because the value that you realize from, I would say, from inside an IT organization, being a software developer or a platform engineer, or being a governance or compliance officer inside a financial institution, or it's very different, and you have different drivers that, and for that, I would say you can go all the way down. And I think it goes back to one of the questions in the chat that is like, how can you bring everyone together into that unified view of value, right? It's difficult because everybody has different objectives on how to provide that value. You can create value stream maps that go across the whole organization and cut across all these different areas, but also each individual area will have their own mappings.
Yeah, and there are a few questions in the chat which we're not going to have time to get to today. There are so many great questions in there that we're going to miss in this live recording, but I think Bob and I should sit down and work through them and document them and send them out to all the attendees. But that one that Mark was just alluding to, let's finish on that one before we hand over to Charlene to do the draw. But, you know, these organizational environments are really, really complicated. We've had one question in there about how to manage value streams when you're an SI or when you're a solution integrator, when you've got no control over the value stream. We had another one about levels of granularity in the value stream, and another one about where we've got dozens or hundreds of digital products where there's no standard process, and how do we use value stream management when we've got that many value streams. And for me, I always use the definition of a value stream being anything that delivers a product or a service. So let's have a quick minute or so for maybe each of you about how value stream management works in complex organizational environments, maybe starting with Heath and then Mark and then finishing with Bob. Sure,
thank you. Yeah, so I think that the last question from the attendee was, you know, with the hundreds of digital products, you really have to work with your leadership team. It has to start there. Leaders have to understand what value they provide to their users. So if it's telco, it's, you know, billing, it's payments, activations, supply chain, promotions. What are the products and services that you're delivering? If it's in banking, it's, you know, how do you move money, external transfers, internal transfers, bill pay, maybe Zelle, some of the new technologies of moving money through the bank. Another value stream, maybe it's your accounts, right? All of your customers and their accounts, and then maybe the customer, you know, help center and the portal, the customer portal. So you got to break up your value streams into how users are, you know, receiving that value, right? If it's Space Force, it's, you know, space situational awareness and military satellite communications, and breaking up these value streams so it's, you know, all the way flow from development to production. Secondly, you have to, you know, really bring everybody into that value stream. I think where we're going in the future, it's going to be the sales and marketing people in that value stream as well, not just the SDLC, right? So can you imagine 5 years from now when users say, you know, I need this or I want this, marketing is right there immediately the next day in the room with the development team, with the requirements folks, writing requirements, doing designs, and getting that capability out the door in a matter of, you know, a couple days, rather than take a full year to write those requirements, get the approval for budgeting, and go through all the compliance and the SDLC. So I think we're going to start to really see acceleration as digital transformation happens, and value stream management is going to be definitely a big part of that.
Fabulous, Mark.
So I would like to add to that for me, that's where value stream mapping and value stream management really fits with the concept of North Star, right? It's when you have all these many different products and these many different things that are very difficult to track. And all the organizations and complex organizations will have that. We have hundreds of different processes and maybe dozens of different products that you have. So it's very important to start with those North Stars, right? Understand what is the vision, what is the mission of your organization, what are you trying to provide to the public in the sense of, for example, the military, what they want to provide, safety, security, right? So it's important where for an insurance company, where they want to provide better insurance products that the customers can buy in, and it adapts to the market and it adapts to the challenges of society. So it's very important to start there, right? Understand the mission and vision, and then be able to stream them down into the value mapping and understand how that value mapping actually aligns with that vision and mission. And that's where you start to make sense of the whole thing together.
And to Bob for the final word before we pass to Charlene.
Well, so I won't repeat what's already been said, but I do think that, you know, that it isn't just the complexities of the multiple value streams, although that's very real and very much true. It's also, there's a lot of mixture of multiple different technologies and methodologies. And so not everything is nice and clean and able to be integrated into even a map or a value stream. I may not even know about some of the software processes that aren't actually part of the pipeline. We talked about a lot of those reviews. I think those complexities are in fact what drives the adoption of value stream management. That's why it exists. It exists because as teams became autonomous and as Agile and DevOps practices became shorter turns, quicker iterations, more connection to the customer, as all that started to happen, the points along the value stream that needed to be monitored and looked at became many more. And that just became too many for people to keep track of. So those need to be a part of the system. That's where value stream management needs to take up and really take over a lot of the manual process, people processes, and instrument them as a part of the management layer. And that's what will drive the adoption of value stream management.
Perfect. Over to Charlene. I think she's popped back in. So thank you, Bob.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. I know we've only got a minute left. So over to you.
Thank you. What a great conversation. I wish you could keep it going at least for another 30 minutes or so. But I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions. And please know that our panelists will be getting a copy of all the questions that came in. So if they didn't answer your question during today's webinar, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you. Do want to remind the audience real quick that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, we are less than a minute to the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and do our drawing for our 4 Amazon gift cards. Our first drawing winner today is got an echo there. Eric A. Congratulations, Eric. Our second winner today is Wayne G. Congratulations, Wayne. Third winner is Letitia R. Congratulations, Letitia. And our final winner today is Sharon A. Congratulations. We'll be following up with all of you offline via email to get your gift card over to you. So if you don't see it in the inbox, check your spam folder. Do want to thank our panelists today. Great conversation. I appreciate the time and your expertise and the great conversation. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.